We have a reading from Streams in the Desert, 1925, first edition, January 4th. It's our fourth time doing it in a row. Jesus saith unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. John 4:50. When ye pray, believe. Mark 11:24. My apologies. We did January 4th on September 11th, the last episode. I apologize. We're on January 5th. I thought it looked familiar, but Lord, there is none beside thee to help. Second Chronicles 14:11. That's January 5th, Streams in the Desert. Remind me, God, of his entire responsibility. There is none beside thee to help. The odds against Asa were enormous. There was 1,000,000 men in arms against him, besides 300 chariots. It seemed impossible to hold his own against that vast multitude. There were no allies who would come to his help. His only hope, therefore, was in God. It may be that your difficulties have been allowed to come to so alarming a pitch that you may be compelled to renounce all creature aid, to which in lesser trials you have had recourse, and cast yourself back on your almighty friend. Page 6 at the top. Put God between yourself and the foe. To Asa's faith, Jehovah seemed to stand between the might of Zerah and himself, as one who had no strength. Nor was he mistaken. We are told that the Ethiopians were destroyed before the Lord and before his host, as though celestial combatants flung themselves against the foe in Israel's behalf and put the large host to rout, so that Israel had only to follow up and gather the spoil. Our God is Jehovah of hosts, who can summon unexpected reinforcements at any moment to aid his people. Believe that he is there between you and your difficulty, and what baffles you will flee before him as clouds before the gale. F.B. Meyer. When nothing thereon to lean remains, when strongholds crumble to dust, when nothing is sure but that God still reigns, that is just the time to trust. 'Tis better to walk by faith than sight in this path of yours and mine, and the pitch black night, when there's no outer light, is the time for faith to shine. Abraham believed God and said to sight, Stand back, and to the laws of nature hold your peace, and to a misgiving heart silence, thou lying tempter. He believed God. Joseph Parker. At Streams in the Desert, January 5th, the 1925 edition, the first edition by Miss Chase E. Cowman. Purchased at Beachtown Books in San Clemente. Republican Town, Republican Bookstore. Now, I wanted to tell you about CBS, Community Bible Study. We meet on Tuesday nights. It's a men's group. We met last Tuesday. What was assigned last Tuesday, catch this, was Psalm 4 and Psalm 11. We're going through the Psalms this year. I want you to hear Psalm 11, verse 2. It made the hair on my arms stand straight up. Now remember, this was assigned last Tuesday. What was last Tuesday? It was just a normal day, right? Just a normal day. Well, here's Psalm 4. Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief for my distress. Be merciful to me and hear my prayer. How long, O men, will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call to him. In your anger, in your anger, do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and trust the Lord. Many are asking, who can show us any good? Let the light of your face shine upon us, O Lord. You have filled my heart with greater joy. One more verse. You have filled my heart with greater joy than when their grain and new wine abound. I will lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. That's Psalm 4. Here's Psalm 11. In the Lord I take refuge. How then can you say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked bend their bows. They set their arrows against the strings to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. That's verse 2. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? That's verse 3. The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. He observes the sons of men. His eyes examine them. The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked and those who love violence his soul hates. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. For the Lord is righteous, he loves justice, upright men will see his face. Like I said, that was assigned last Tuesday. Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. Today is 16 September 2025, years after Jesus. Today we're going through Mollie Hemingway's reaction to the newly released Russia hoax documents, published in Imprimis. Oh, almost 7 million readers, sent free. All you have to do is ask Hillsdale College for it and they'll send it to you. This is September 2025, volume 54, number 9. It is a publication of Hillsdale College. We would love to thank Hillsdale for making this material available. We're going to do a fair use of this material, make a transformative reading of it, and send Hillsdale some money. Look it up online at Hillsdale College and send them a check in the mail. They could use the help. They're one of the legit colleges out there. There's a few of them, not very many, and I'm sure they'll put it to good use. Here's Mollie Hemingway in this past Imprimis. Within hours of her 2016 presidential campaign loss, a devastated Hillary Clinton attributed her defeat not to the American voters who rejected her, but to Russia, echoing a campaign theme that she had been developing for months. Hillary declined to take responsibility for her own loss and kept pointing her finger at Russia, according to Shattered, a 2017 book about her campaign. Her team coalesced around the ideas that Russian hacking was the major underreported story of the campaign. The corporate media were also devastated. as they had spent the entire campaign mocking the idea that Trump and his anti-establishment positions on foreign policy, trade, and wokeness could appeal to voters. To the extent possible, they would help promote Clinton's blame game. This is what Imprimis looks like, by the way. Um, I keep all of them. Mollie Hemingway is editor in chief at The Federalist, senior journalism fellow at Hillsdale College, and a Fox News contributor. She received her BA from the University of Colorado at Denver, my hometown. She has written for numerous publications. Well, my hometown is actually Littleton, which is southwest Denver metro area, but it's Jefferson County. I went to Chatfield High School. I did go to Denver Seminary later for graduate school, but that's in Littleton too now, so not Denver. She has written for numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Christianity Today. She is co author of Justice on Trial, The Kavanaugh Confirmation, and the Future of the Supreme Court. That's a fantastic book, by the way. I wrote her and told her about it. She wrote me back. Um, and author of Rigged: How the Media, Big Tech, and Democrats Seized Our Elections. That Kavanaugh book is great. In fact, I think that would be a good one to have on the podcast, the feature on the podcast. I might do some transformative readings from it. We're getting back up here on topics. Okay, let's keep going on this. Hillsdale College, pursuing truth, defending liberty since 1844. Here's Hemingway again. In early January 2017, the Clinton campaign's Steele dossier, a secretly funded collection of made up stories and gossip, alleging that Russia had dirt on Trump and that Trump was colluding with Russia against the United States, was published. The Washington would be consumed by the Russia collusion hoax for the next 2.5 years. The investigations it spurred would bankrupt Trump's associates, destroy lives, and hamstring Trump's ability to govern. It led to draconian censorship campaigns against conservatives. It hurt Republicans in the 2018 midterm elections and the 2020 general election. But no evidence was found that a single American, and I would add Molly, or a married American, both single and married, that no evidence was found that a single American, much less Trump himself, conspired with Russia. Fast forward to today, 6 months into Trump's second term, CIA Director John Ratcliffe and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard have declassified and released long suppressed documents detailing how President Obama and his spy chiefs laundered the Steele dossier and other falsehoods in an attempt to destroy Trump's first presidency. The response from Democrats, the media, and many establishment Republicans has been to say that these suppressed documents contain nothing new or significant. Not true, says Mollie Hemingway. The Russia collusion hoax was anchored to two central claims. First, that Trump was a compromised agent of Russia, and second, that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump. The first claim was completely debunked after years of investigation. Wow, years of just bullcrap. It is on the second and far more plausible claim, which was just as key to the hoax, that the newly released documents shed new light. And the revelations are shocking. Mollie Hemingway continues. By the way, Did you know that she's related to John Steinbeck? Just kidding. I just threw that in there just to screw this up. No relation to Ernest Hemingway, as far as I know. Maybe there's a relationship there. I don't know. Maybe she drinks a lot. Maybe she's a good writer. She is a good writer. Maybe she likes go fishing. Thank God she likes to go fishing because she caught some great stuff here. Here's Hemingway again. The documents show that in early December 2016, the intelligence community planned to publish a top secret presidential daily brief holding that Russian and criminal actors did not impact recent U.S. election results by conducting malicious cyber activities against election infrastructure. Once published, this brief would have been read by Obama and his top officials, as well as President-elect Trump and his designated National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. I've heard of that guy. But the day before publication, the FBI, which had co-authored the brief, announced that it was pulling its support for the brief and would be drafting a dissent. The Office of the Director of the National Intelligence announced that the brief would be held for the following week. In the end, the brief was never published. Instead, Obama ordered his top spy chiefs to put together an intelligence community assessment known as an ICA, spelled ICA, on Russia election meddling. The chiefs were directed to look at how Moscow sought to influence the 2016 election, including with hacking, leaks, cyber activity against voting systems, and fake news. And to answer the questions, why did Moscow direct these activities, and what have the Russians hoped to accomplish? Prior to this order from Obama, the spy agencies had assessed that Russia's efforts to interfere with the 2016 election were consistent with Russia's previous and long-standing election year meddling and cyber hacking efforts. They found that Russia's goal was to mess with and decrease confidence in U.S. elections. How are you guys doing? Thank you, Mollie, for writing this. I know you listened to the podcast, and I want to let you know we are grateful for your work on this. Thank you. We're also grateful for your work at the Federalist. Appreciate it. Much appreciated. Mucho apreciado. All right. I gotta take a drink of water. Now that my mouth is watered, where was I? Mess with. Hmm. Okay. Prior to this order from Obama, the spy agencies had assessed that Russia's efforts to interfere with the 2016 election were consistent with Russia's previous long-standing election year meddling and cyber hacking efforts. They found that Russia's goal was to mess with and decrease confidence in U.S. elections rather than help elect particular candidates. But on the evening of December 9th, 2016, the Washington Post published a story sourced to unnamed senior Obama officials claiming that the CIA had concluded in a secret assessment that Russia intervened in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump. That was a lie, says Mollie Hemingway. Okay, Moll, tell us how you really feel. The process, says Mollie, by which such assessments are made by the CIA hadn't taken place, much less concluded anything. The same false information was leaked to the New York Times. You'd think that the Washington Post would know the process. You'd think. You would think they would have somebody that went to college and that weren't grade inflated, but maybe they fired all the old people. The process by which such assessments are made by the CIA hadn't taken place, much less concluded anything. The same false information was leaked to the New York Times. Here's a quote. American intelligence agency, it reported, have concluded with high confidence that Russia acted covertly to harm Hillary Clinton's chances and promote Donald Trump, according to senior administration officials, unquote. Both papers were awarded Pulitzers the next year for their willingness to participate without a bit of skepticism in this disinformation operation. A few days later, Obama, yo mama, poured gasoline on the fire by publicly expressing concern that potential hacking could hamper vote counting and affect the actual election process itself. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, CIA Director John Brennan, and FBI Director James Comey were working furiously. Were they really angry, Molly? Were working furiously to throw together the ICA Obama had ordered. Typically, such an assessment would take a minimum of several months and include a wide variety of perspectives. You would think that somebody at the Washington Post or New York Times would know that, or someone on the Pulitzer Committee would know that, but apparently they're all a bunch of grade inflates. Typically, such an assessment, the ICA, A means assessment, would take a minimum of several months. This ICA was prepared in 2 weeks using only 5 CIA staffers to draft it. And by the way, during the holidays. Yeah. Government workers are not known to try to rush things at the holidays if there's no impending reason to do so. Ask me how I know. Prepared in 2 weeks. Yeah. Something weird with that, man. There's something weird. Molly, you have good instincts here. Comey, Brennan, and Clapper overruled strenuous objections from senior intelligence officials who were aghast at the inclusion of unsubstantiated claims and unverified gossip. Good. There's people that were not grade inflated that are still there. Thank God. That was the best thing I read all day. And I read this last week. It's the best thing I read all day last week and today. Some who complained had their promotions threatened. Others were told they were not privy to secret intelligence reviewed only by top leadership. The Finished ICA was reported on to Obama on January 5th, 2017, and to Trump the next day. In addition to findings that were credible and substantiated, the report said that Putin had developed a clear preference for Trump and aspired to help his chances of victory. It also included, contrary to the public testimony of Obama's spy chiefs, a two-page summary of the Clinton campaign's Steele dossier in the most classified version of the report. Comey met privately with Trump at the end of his briefing to tell him about the unverified allegations that Russia held proof of salacious sexual and financial impropriety on the part of Trump. 4 days later, CNN reported extensively on the meeting and what Trump was told. At this point, the Russia hoax was fully operational and would do severe damage to our country for years to come. I hope you're paying attention to this. One document Radcliffe released is a tradecraft review of the January 2017 ICA, conducted by career officials at CIA. The review found that the dishonest leaks by the Obama administration in December 2016 created an anchoring bias that polluted the entire document. We're on page 3 at the bottom. Again, this is Imprimis, September 2025, volume 54, number 9, by Mollie Hemingway, called, what did they call it? The significance of the recently released Russia hoax documents. Materials made available generously by Hillsdale College for free. It's free. It's on their website. Anybody can look at it. It's public. It's free. And they will send you a physical copy in the mail. And I keep them. Okay, anchoring bias. The review also expressed concern about the ICA's frantic production timeline. Yeah, I'd be concerned about that too. That's when mistakes are made, or it's when dissent is usually just crushed. The refusal to allow analysts reviewing, another page. Remember, this resulted in Pulitzer Prizes for you Democrat friends. The documents to see the intelligence its collusions were based on, and the over-involvement of Comey, Brennan, and Clapper. It found that the assessment gave a higher confidence level than was justified to the claim that Russia preferred Trump and that it was tainted by a potential political motive. Let me read that again. The review also expressed concern. This is the Tradecraft review about the ICA's frantic production timeline. The refusal to allow analysts, that's the non-political professional bureaucrats. We call them non-political because their appointment is not a matter of political party, or it's not a matter of confirmation by the Senate. You know, it's like you get the next rung in the ladder when you've been there for a while and you meet certain objective standards for success. So this review also expressed concern about the ICA's frantic production timeline. These would be the professional spies, basically, that work. I mean, it's kind of like the military in a way. When I was I had a top secret clearance when I was 19. TSSCI, top secret sensitive compartment information. And I had that clearance for many years, uh, worked with at least, well, I'm not going to say much more about that, but the I had this kind of experience very early on in my life when my friends were in college smoking pot and drinking too much and not doing their homework. Um, I actually had a lot of responsibility and a lot of accountability, and my eyes were open to things that normal teenagers don't have their eyes open to. So I was also introduced to the vast bureaucracy of the national security state and what's expected on a professional basis from the run of the mill people that work there. So, as when I say professional class, these would be the people that would be working similarly to more advanced roles that I had or and I could have had if I stayed in. Um, Similar to advanced roles that I actually did have, even as a young man. But people who would want to rise in the ranks of supervisor, manager, all that, they express concern about the production timeline and refusal to allow analysts, that's the professional class, not the political appointees, reviewing the document to see the intelligence its conclusions were based on, and the over involvement of Comey, Brennan, and Clapper. It found that the assessment gave a higher confidence level than that was justified to the claim that Russia preferred Trump and that it was tainted by a potential political motive. Gabbard released an even more explosive report. Now remember, Gabbard is not she's not authoring these reports. She is Trump's a political appointee who has the classification authority to declassify what was there. That's what she's doing. So she's just saying this is what was there that they were trying to hide from the American public. By the way, Gabbard used to be a Democrat. Did you remember that? Not very long ago, she was a Democrat in Hawaii, of all places. That's where I was stationed. That's where I worked in intelligence for a long time, so for several years. Gabbard released an even more explosive report, authored in 2017 and 2018 by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Representative Devin Nunes. It had been hidden in a top secret vault for 7 years. It conclusively debunked the ICA's key judgments. By the way, don't you love there's vaults with paper in it? Thank God. Love paper. Love it. It conclusively debunked the ICA's key judgment about Putin's preference for Trump, excoriating the ICA for using the preposterous Steele dossier as a basis for its claims, and detailing how the views of career intelligence officials were overruled and dismissed. Yeah, you might be wondering, this guy, Devin Nunes, knew about it in Congress. Why didn't he just release it? Because that would have been illegal, highly classified. The executive branch makes the classification determination. Well, why is that? It's part of the sync power, commander in chief power, which is in Article 2, which is an executive power. So the president has that. So Congress didn't have the authority to declassify it. But once Trump appointed Gabbard, then she had delegated executive power from the president, the commander in chief, to classify or declassify. The ultimate classification authority in the United States is the commander in chief, president. You guys following that? This is a separation of powers issue. Okay. Brennan. Now I have the word wow written in the side here. Brennan had long publicly claimed that he had secret knowledge separate and apart from the Steele dossier to support his view that Russia interfered to help Trump. That's wow. Basically, Brennan is saying, "Hey, I'm a spy. Me, myself, by myself over here. I'm gathering intelligence as the director." That's usually not the director's role. Not saying it's impossible, but it's not usually how it works outside of Tom Clancy films. And even then, that's not the director. That's the deputy director. um, maybe you're not following anything I'm saying. Well, I don't. I have to just keep going here. In August and September 2016, he had individually briefed the Gang of Eight, the top Senate and House officials who oversee the CIA. And it turned out that Brennan's so called secret knowledge was laughable. It was based mostly on three reports that contained flawed information and became foundational sources for the claim that Putin aspired to help Trump. Veteran CIA officers had said the reports contained substandard information. Did you hear that? Substandard information. This is what the CIA officers, the career people, are saying. Not political appointees, but the people that spend their whole careers there, working anonymously. You don't know who they are. Veteran CIA officers had said the reports contained substandard information that was unclear, of uncertain origin, potentially biased and implausible, and odd. It's pretty odd. This is awkward because it's your boss. The director is your boss. So you have to say this about your boss. Brennan hadn't allowed some of the information to go through normal vetting procedures when it was collected. And he personally directed that two of the most important reports not be formally disseminated when he first learned of them, supposedly because they were so sensitive. Man, this trick. I'm hoping you're paying attention to this trick. They were so sensitive. A questionable explanation given that the CIA has a special reporting channel for sensitive reports that are restricted to the president and other named individuals. What he tried to do is he tried to use his top privilege as the director to claim a classification level that really doesn't exist, to shield it from career officers and other normal reporting procedures that are for highly sensitive stuff. I mean, that's why these things exist. There's all sorts of procedures to handle classified information. I I wouldn't have any confidence to talk about this if I hadn't seen it myself with my own eyes. And I know basics. I know basics. I've been read into programs that when I left, it I felt like I might have been dreaming, but I wasn't. I wasn't because there's other people there and I was able to go, did I hear that right? And then they're like, yeah. Um yeah, and I wasn't even read into that much. I mean, I was just a kid, but I was read into some multiple different programs that were sounded to me like science fiction to me, but maybe that's a wrong word. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't listen to me. Maybe I should edit this part out. I don't know. The only classified information cited in the ICA for the claim that Putin aspired to help Trump's chances of victory was a fragment of a sentence that came from someone who did not personally know Putin. Man, man. The fragment, consisting of the words whose victory Putin was counting on, had been collected prior to the July 2016 Republican National Convention. So, who could even know to which victory it referred? Furthermore, it is not known whether the fragment reflected the subsource's opinion of Putin's thinking, Putin's actual statements to his subsource, or the views of someone else reflecting on Putin's thinking to the subsource. Wow. Its meaning was so unclear that five people read it five ways, according to the report. And I have in the margin, wow. Guys, this is the foundation of the Russia hoax that basically derailed Trump's first term. It was all Democrat dirty tricks. And illegal, by the way. For these reasons, experienced CIA officers initially omitted the fragment from the ICA, but Brennan ordered that it be included. One senior CIA officer, alarmed that it was the only evidence offered for the ICA's main conclusion, noted the lack of direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected. Back to basics, you know, evidence, that whole thing, so making an argument. The ICA also failed to address the strong anti Trump bias on the part of the source of the fragment. Wow. Back to basics, people. The ICA claimed that a Russian political expert possessed a plan that recommended engagement with Trump's team because of the projects for improved U.S. Russia relations. This claim was viewed as lacking authoritativeness, and the CIA decided not to publish the intelligence even internally when they received it in February 2016. That's probably because the so-called plan was in fact only an anonymous email with no date, no identified sender, no clear recipient, and no classification. Not to mention that it was passed along by a foreign country with a noted anti-Trump bias. Wow. Uh, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing. The ICA then claimed, it's not even my political party, and I'm embarrassed. The ICA then claimed that Putin's inner circle strongly preferred Republican over Democratic candidates because they judged that Republicans historically less focused on democracy and human rights. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure. The phrase strongly preferred Republican never appeared in the raw intelligence report, and the ultimate source for the claim is unknown. What's more, the claim that Republicans cared less about democracy and human rights in Russia was implausible. The Select Committee report noted that President Reagan was famous for his Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall speech, but a myriad other examples could be cited. The ICA claimed that the clear preference report was corroborated by liaison, diplomatic, and press reporting, when in fact none of that was true. The liaison reporting was from 2014 and didn't mention Trump. We just finished page 5. Didn't mention Trump at all. The diplomatic report was a post-election overview from the U.S. ambassador, noting that a Russian pundit had said, and Putin should work. I screwed that sentence up. The diplomatic report was a post-election overview from the U.S. ambassador, noting that a Russian pundit said Trump and Putin should work together like businessmen. Hardly corroboration for the claim that Putin's inner circle preferred Republicans. Indeed, that same ambassador's note quoted a Russian foreign minister saying, quote, "We do not feel any euphoria," unquote, about Trump's win. By the way, there's a lot of direct quotes. I'm not doing quote and unquote just for smoothness here. Man. The ICA also omitted intelligence that Putin was telling people that he did not care who won the election, that he had outlined the weakness of both major candidates, and that Russia was strategically placed to outmaneuver either candidate. If anything, Russia was preparing for Clinton's victory and felt she was more predictable. The Kremlin worried that Trump officials would likely adhere to conservative anti-Russian positions. Putin took exception to a favorable view of Trump and said there was no basis for enthusiasm for Trump. There's some direct quotations in here. The original New York Times report on the CIA's assessment said that although Russia had allegedly hacked both Republicans and Democrats, it had only released Democrats' embarrassing email. In fact, the CIA had no evidence that Russia held embarrassing emails or information on Republicans. It did have evidence that Russia had embarrassing information on Clinton that was never released. Tell us more, Mollie. This included the fact that Obama and other party leaders thought Clinton's health to be, quote, extraordinarily alarming, unquote. That Clinton was suffering from, quote, intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, unquote. And perhaps that she had been placed on, quote, heavy tranquilizers, unquote. If Putin favored Trump, it would be odd not to have this released. It would be odd not to have released this information in the closing days of the campaign. That would be very odd. The use of weak, disputed, and contradicted intelligence to make the claim about Russia preferring Trump wasn't the only problem with the ICA. Well, tell us more, Mollie. Its use of the Steele dossier was another. Brennan lied publicly when he testified to Congress on 23 May 2017 that the dossier was, quote, not in any way used as a basis for the ICA that was done, unquote. Not only was it was it cited as the fourth bullet point of evidence that Putin aspired to help Trump, it was falsely described as Russian plans and intentions and having come from an FBI source. The dossier was presented in a two-page summary that implied some of its findings had been corroborated, misrepresenting both the significance and the credibility of the dossier, according to the Select Committee report. Further, by hiding the dossier summary in the highest classified version, the Obama spy chiefs were better able to shield the assessment from scrutiny. See, because Congress can't talk about it. They know about it, but they can't talk about it without breaking the law. See, if they leak it, then they get investigated by Democrat FBI and then they go to jail, right? You see the game? The documents released by Ratcliffe and Gappard now show that career officers were pleading with their bosses not to assert falsely that Russia preferred Trump and not to include the Steele dossier in any way, shape, or form. One wrote, based solely on what we do know now, My bottom line is this: unless FBI is prepared to provide much better sourcing, I'm going to adjust here. Here, look at this side of my tie, okay? Unless FBI is prepared to provide much better sourcing, I believe this should not be included in the paper. That's a direct quote. Noting that the document had not been formally issued as an FBI product, this same official characterized it as suffering from poor source tradecraft, all in capital letters, direct quote, as having extremely sketchy sourcing and as failing to meet normal intelligence community standards. Career senior intelligence officials worried about the dossier's author being funded by an anti Trump entity, even though they did not know yet that the funding came from the Clinton campaign. Jeez. They also worried about the lack of transparency regarding the dossier's subsources, a concern validated weeks later when the FBI finally got around to interviewing primary subsource Igor Dachenko, a Russian national and the FBI had suspected of being a spy, and determined that the salacious allegations in the dossier lacked any credibility. Wow. Despite this, the FBI defended the use of the dossier for years and hid Dushchenko's identity from Congress by hiring him as a confidential informant, a ruse allowing them to claim that revealing his identity would endanger ongoing investigations. When Comey insisted that the information in the document was good, one intelligence official wondered why. If so, it hadn't been used against Trump during the campaign. Including the Steele dossier in the ICA, this official added, would be like taking supermarket tabloids seriously. Pointing to a December 12, 2016 National Enquirer story headlined Muslim Spies in Obama's CIA, he asked rhetorically if that report should be included in the ICA as well. uh, in the margin, I have LOL. Confronted by a reviewer who wrote that there was no intelligence to directly support the claim that Russia aspired to help Trump and that making the claim would open the intelligence community to a line of very politicized inquiry that is sure to come up when the paper is shared with the Hill. Brennan called him and other dissenting officials into his office and told them he knew better. Confronted with demands from senior officials that the Steele dossier not be included, Brennan insisted it stay in. Doesn't it ring true? He asked. We got the last part of the paper here coming up. In the wake of these recent document releases, the Department of Justice announced in July that it had formed a strike force, a means of allowing federal investigators across multiple agencies to pursue criminals engaged in conspiracies. An unnamed federal prosecutor began securing additional documents from the spy agencies. After collecting the necessary documents, the federal prosecutor will begin speaking with the whistleblowers and others with knowledge about how the Russia hoax operation was run. Once his team has a clear picture, they will bring in some of the targets of the investigation for interviews. With a statute of limitations at 5 years for most of these potential crimes, the Department of Justice may have to show that the conspiracy against Trump is ongoing, a task made easier by the fact that some of Obama's spy chiefs continue to defend their actions. Last paragraph. You see the 5-year statute of limitations thing? That means the statute of limitations ran out in 2023, unless it's an ongoing crime, because the statute of limitations goes back to the last overt act. And so if it's an ongoing conspiracy, then the last overt act would have been during Biden's presidency. And so the statute of limitations hasn't run out yet. You see that? That's why they're going after conspiracy, because that could be an overt act, could be finding the evidence for that is going to be the tricky part, but it could be there. Just got to find it. The evidence for that could be anybody that wants to roll over and provide some documentation. Back in 2017, 3 days before he was briefed on the Steele dossier, Senate Democratic leader Charles Schumer warned President elect Trump against criticizing the FBI and the CIA. Let me tell you, he said, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's really dumb to do this, unquote. Well, that's interesting since last time I checked, the president is in charge of the intelligence community. The intelligence community is an executive branch function, and the entire executive power is vested in a person, the president. Not some, all. Thanks to Trump's victory last November, it may be Obama's spy chiefs who will regret taking on Trump. I read this. When did I read this? I read this last week and had a great time. I hope you did too. I read this 7:45 p.m., 11 September 2025, and I was smoking an Oliva 3. Pretty cool. Look at that. Look how pretty that wrapper is. That is a beautiful wrapper. Just take a look. That's on the daggum cigar. So beautiful. And there's Hillsdale College's mailing address. If you want to write them and ask for this, they'll send it to you. Free. Free of charge. I like a nice cigar, and I highly recommend the Oliva 3. They're not a paid sponsor, FYI. Well, anyway, guys, it also said I was drinking Wolcott Kentucky bourbon, also not a paid sponsor, but pretty smooth. First time I'd had it. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. I also have an associate degree, in case you wanted to know that. In case you probably are wondering. Thanks for joining me on 16 September 2025, years after Jesus. Thank you, Lord, that Trump won and that this is all coming to light. Lord, we ask that you'd be with these federal prosecutors and investigators as they seek to uncover the truth of what this Russia hoax operation looked like. Lord, would you please help us prevent this kind of harm to our system in the future? Help us increase the likelihood of human flourishing. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Mollie Hemingway, for writing this and Imprimis. And there's a couple of quotations that are worth bearing in mind and repeating. Here's one. Back in January 2017, Senate Democratic leader Charles Schumer warned President-elect Trump to stop criticizing the FBI and the CIA. Fascinating. Let me tell you, he said, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this. Thanks to Trump's victory last November, may be Obama's spy chiefs who will regret taking on Trump. That is such an ignorant statement because the president is in charge of the CIA and FBI, not the other way around. Shows you how sick the Democrats have become in our separation of powers system. Here's another juicy quote on page 4. The documents show that career officers were pleading with their bosses not to assert falsely that Russia preferred Trump and not to include the Steele dossier. One wrote, based solely on what we do know now, I believe the dossier should not be included in the paper. This same official characterized it as suffering from poor source tradecraft, as having extremely sketchy sourcing, and as failing to meet normal intelligence community standards. Here's another juicy quote. The Russia collusion hoax was anchored to 2 central claims. First, that Trump was a compromised agent of Russia, and second, that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump. The first claim was completely debunked after years of investigation. It is the second, far more plausible claim, which was just as key to the hoax, that the newly released documents shed new light, and the revelations are shocking. We'll see you next time. Tomorrow is the 17th of September. And why do we care about that? It's Constitution Day. If you're a Republican parent, you call yourself a patriot, you call yourself a so called conservative, and you don't make as big a deal of Constitution Day as July 4th, you are part of the problem. You're abusing your kids. Pull your head out of your freaking butt. The U.S. Constitution is a gem, and it's just as big a deal as Declaration of Independence. Separation of powers protects individual liberty. That's what the U.S. Constitution did. It took the next major step at securing the promises of the Declaration, the aspirations, the belief that what had happened in the past and was firmly ensconced about human nature metaphysically, that we are created equally by God, and that we're endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's what led to the abolition of slavery and the development of the Republican Party. And it was the Republican Party that took both the Declaration and the Constitution seriously in ending slavery. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. See you.